Hello again, it's Rowan Anderson with Dairy Locust Garden Center. So, I'm coming to you today from inside of our mise, which is Japanese for store. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Anyway, we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show you 4 or 5 Root-Over-Rock Trident Maples. Every tree in our garden has a story. And the story behind these is, so as I was saying, there was a vendor named Ed Clark who still owns Round Valley Nursery in Tulare County. And he had, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60, I believe, Trident Maples Root-Over-Rock. And I purchased close to 30. And then I took those back and I took those back to Santa Cruz, and my students in Santa Cruz at the time helped me reduce them. They all had 4 or 5 foot leaders. You know, they're growing pretty good. Now, before I continue, I need to tell you that Ed Clark said those trees had been in the ground, I believe, 10 years before I got them. So here we are in 2025, and they've gone through a process. And I'm going to explain that process in between sitting here, and then I'm going to go get one of those trees or a few of those trees, and we'll work on them together and talk about those trees. All right, let's continue. So I went back to Santa Cruz. My second, third, fourth year students at the time worked on the trees. The bases, I shouldn't say the bases, the tops of the tree were about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick, and there were multiple ones coming out of one spot. So we cut those off and saved most of those, turned them into other trees. We kept them for about a year and a half, and then wired those trees later. And so the trees that I'm going to show you are the trees that are left out of those 30 trees 25, 30 trees that I purchased at that time. And so the first thing we did was cut everything off the tops and put cut paste on them. And they were still in the black pots of death, and they were solid. So the black pots of death is my way of saying in a nursery pot before we transition it to a better pot, a growing pot, plastic growing pot, or a nicer pot. So a lot of these trees, Root-Over-Rock, I couldn't tell they were Root-Over-Rock. They were buried, you know, all the way up to the part where the roots were growing over the tree, and I might have been able to see a few Root-Over-Rock, but most of them were completely buried. So you're going on faith that there's a rock underneath this thing, okay? So it was about 2 years, maybe a year or two, before we started removing or exposing those rocks. Okay, and so what we did was we took our bent tweezers and we started to expose the bases of these trees, and we only did about maybe an inch and a half at a time, and then we potted them. And so I'm going to show you those trees today, the ones that I have left, and tell you a little bit more of their stories. All right, stay tuned. So this is one of the first 3 trees that I'm going to work on. Looks like the wire's cutting in a little bit much, and so we need to take that wire off. I'm going to take that into the yurt and we will work on this tree. And then here is the other tree that we'll work on. Cut it back a little bit and take that wire off. So the same story goes for all these trees, no matter what I'm doing on them. They all were buried to about right here. And then there was big, which I'll show you in a little bit, big, you know, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch leaders, this thick, right, that went up about 4 or 5 feet. And so none of this was there. We cut those all off, right? And then I think about a year later, we started trying to expose and find the base of this tree. We got down to about here. And then every 2 years, about every 2 years after that, we took a little bit more and 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 a little bit more until you have what we see today. And it must just be amazing what they do in Japan to these trees, because you just see some monsters of trees over rocks. So thanks to Ed for starting this tree. So the first thing I'm going to do on this tree is take off all this wire, and then I'll worry about cut back some of these branches.